These now give rise to the motivation of bodhicitta, the thought, I will establish all mother beings, limitless in number as the vast reaches of space, at the level of perfect, unsurpassable enlightenment, and to that end, in order to be able to do that, I will now listen to this profound Dharma and put it into practice accordingly. What Dharma are we looking at today? We're looking at the superior verses in praise of Buddha Shakyamuni. So, superior verses in praise of Buddha Shakyamuni, actually in Tibetan this is called Kyepar Dubakwe. So the first word, Kyepar, means difference. So this refers to the fact that in this text we find a distinction made between, or rather the differences between the non-Buddhist teachings and the teachings of Buddha Shakyamuni are highlighted and presented. And then it is shown through this comparison how Buddha's teaching and Buddha himself is superior to non-Buddhist teachings. This text is composed by two brothers, Totsun Drubje and Drubje. So these two brothers who lived in ancient India, and they wrote this text. It was just after Buddha Shakyamuni's passing, so about 2,300 years ago. So as I said, this text that we're looking at was written by two masters, two brothers, who lived around 2,300 years ago. It being so long ago, we don't have records of their exact birth dates and so on, but we can estimate with confidence that they lived around 2,300 years ago. So as I said, shortly, not long after Buddha Shakyamuni passed. So let's speak first a little bit about these two brothers. We need to know who they are, something about them, right, since they're the authors of this text. Well, these two brothers, Totsun Drubje and Drubje, they were born as Brahmins. So their parents were both Brahmins. Brahmins are the highest class in India traditionally. And they're also non-Buddhist, right? They're Hindus by heritage. We could say, yeah, they're the highest class in traditional Indian society. So these two brothers were born Brahmins, and they were raised in that sort of environment. They became extremely learned, highly expert in the Vedas. So the Vedas, there are 4 Vedas, right? And these are we could say the fundamental and also the highest, most revered and sort of central Hindu scriptures. So these brothers became very well versed in the 4 Vedas. They were very smart, very gifted and intelligent, but they also encountered Buddha Shakyamuni's teachings, and they were really taken by these teachings. They thought they were very unique, very special. There was really some really special quality to Buddha's teachings. But they're Brahmins, right? Buddha Dharma is not their heritage. Their heritage is Hinduism. So they were not sure quite what to do with this interest in Buddha Shakyamuni's teachings. At the time, there was word that Shiva, Lord Shiva, the great deity, was living at Mount Kailash. And so they thought, the brothers discussed, and they thought, okay, well, let's go on pilgrimage to Mount Kailash and actually see Lord Shiva. And then let's ask him. Let's ask him about Buddha Shakyamuni's teachings and see what he says. Then we will know once and for all which are the most precious and also valid teachings, the Vedas or Buddha Shakyamuni's teaching. So let's go and ask and find out once and for all. And so these two brothers began to plan their journey to Mount Kailash, right? Because they heard that Lord Shiva was living at Mount Kailash. Now, when we say that Lord Shiva was living in Mount Kailash 2,500 years ago, well, it can get a bit problematic to say this, because if Lord Shiva was really living there, sort of in the form of a human or physical being, well, then there should be some evidence of that, right? We should be able to see some remains of his house and some physical evidence of his being there. If that's what we mean, if that's what's meant when we say that Lord Shiva lived in Mount Kailash 2,500 years ago, if he was really staying there in kind of physical form. It's not such a problem if you say this kind of thing to Tibetans, they're not really going to follow up with questions, but you Chinese for sure will maybe be skeptical when you hear something like this. And then you'll want evidence, right? You'll ask, well, where are the remains of his dwelling? What was his residence like? How big was it? How many rooms? Have the archaeologists found the foundation? And so on and so forth. So I think it's important to say a few words about this. Well, generally speaking, it is said that Mount Kailash is the dwelling place of Lord Shiva. It's the palace of Lord Shiva. It's also said to be the palace or dwelling place of Chakrasamvara from the Buddhist point of view, right? It's a sacred place that Buddha Shakyamuni visited, that Guru Rinpoche visited, that Mahasiddha Samapa visited, that Atisha and so many other holy masters have visited. But the Mount Kailash as we know it today, well, it is quite a barren, rocky mountain, and there are no remains that we can see of a palace or residence of Lord Shiva or what have you. But in any case, back during the time of these two brothers, around 2,500 years ago, it was renowned that Lord Shiva lived at Mount Kailash. That was his residence was there. And also the area is described as being full of forests and trees. These days, when you go to Mount Kailash, there's not a single tree in sight. There's barely any vegetation. It's a very barren, rocky area. And the mountain itself is just covered in snow. There are no trees in sight. So it can be a bit, let's say, problematic, a bit problematic when we hear this, read and hear the accounts of Lord Shiva living in Mount Kailash in years past. It's not like... because there's no physical evidence of that being the case, and we might wonder, well, could that really be so? It's not like when we hear that Buddha Shakyamuni was born in Lumbini. Well, we can actually go to Lumbini, that physical place, and there's some physical evidence of Buddha Shakyamuni having been there in the past, right? Likewise, the fact that he manifested enlightenment in Bodh Gaya, he taught in Varanasi and so on, we can find various remains and so on to back up all of those statements. There are stupas and the like, and so it all it kind of matches with our human mindset, right? With our normal understanding of things, that there is this physical evidence of Buddha having been in these places and done certain things, right? So these days, in a court of law, then lawyers ask 5 important questions, right? Something like, who was the perpetrator? Where was the act done? When was it done? And so on, right? 5 kind of crucial questions where you could ask all those 5 to or about Buddha Shakyamuni and give answers, very satisfactory answers. But there isn't the same kind of evidence that we can present to back up this statement that Lord Shiva was living in Mount Kailash 2,500 years ago. So then how to understand this, right? When we hear here that these 2 brothers went off to see Lord Shiva at Mount Kailash because that's where he was living at the time. Well, when I think about it, and this is what I'm going to say now is just my own kind of surmising, my own thoughts. It seems to me that these 2 brothers must have had some experience in meditation, in samadhi. When you practice samadhi, you can gain some kind of special powers and your perception changes, right? So through the strength of your meditation, you can experience pure visions or pure perception. So when I think about it, I think that's probably what happened with these brothers. Through the strength of their meditation, the pure perception risen through their meditation, then they had this vision, this encounter with Lord Shiva, and they perceived what they perceived through the strength of their meditation. So actually better than saying pure perception, it would be better to say through the strength of their meditation. So through the strength of their meditation, the power of their samadhi, then it seems to me that that was how these brothers met Lord Shiva in Mount Kailash, and how they met with him in person, and how they perceived the surroundings the way they did, as a kind of fertile area full of trees and vegetation and so on. And similarly, actually, when you look at the accounts of Mount Kailash and other sacred places, well, you find accounts of Tibetan teachers as well, going to these places and perceiving them as palaces, as mansions, and so on and so forth. Even though that's not the perception that myself and others have when visiting Mount Kailash. Mount Kailash appears to me and to many others as quite a barren place, a mountain covered in snow, a place with no trees and no vegetation. But nevertheless, it has been experienced by and perceived by other masters, including these 2 brothers, in quite a different way. So we have these different perceptions, right, or accounts of different perceptions of this location, Mount Kailash. And Yeah, since the audience today is Taiwanese students, well, it's always important to cover all ground very thoroughly and very meticulously, because some of you have kind of more skeptical minds. So this is why I'm going into this. You might also think, well, how could they even reach there 2,500 years ago? How could they get to this place? Mount Kailash is incredibly high, maybe 7,000 meters high or higher, almost as high as Mount Everest. So how could they have even got up there, Back then no one could ascend mountains that high, let alone live there. So how could Lord Shiva have been living there? So you might have all these questions. So when I think about it, about how this could have been possible, well, it seems to me it must have been through the strength of their meditation, the power of their samadhi, that these two brothers were able to visit this place and experience it as they did. And again, why were these two brothers making this journey to see Lord Shiva in Mount Kailash? Well, so that they could figure out once and for all which is the most genuine teaching, who is the most genuine teacher, the teachings of Buddha Shakyamuni or the teachings of the Vedas. Which teaching is the most authentic? Which should we follow, right? It was to ask Lord Shiva this question that they were making the journey. And so they set off, and as I said, it seems to me, I imagined that they were able to make this journey and have the experience they did through the power of their samadhi. So they set off and they arrived in Mount Kailash. They experienced it as this very fertile place full of trees and vegetation, a really rich and beautiful, delightful land. They traveled through it further up and up and up. And as they were venturing through the forest, they came across a beautiful woman, a beautiful, elegant woman who was carrying fruits in her hand, holding them up aloft in her hand. This was Uma Devi, Lord Shiva's consort. And encountering Uma Devi, they told her who they were, why they'd come. They said, "We've made the journey here from India. We've come to see Lord Shiva. Is he here? Can we request an audience with him? Where might we find him?" And Uma Devi replied, "Well, yes, Lord Shiva is here. He's residing a little further up. So keep going, or come with me and I will arrange for you to see him." And so they kept walking along through the forest as Uma Devi instructed, and they came to this enormous, vast arrangement of flowers and seats and cushions and tables of delicious food and drinks. A really elaborate banquet was arranged. When they saw this amazing arrangement, all of this preparation, they said, "What is this for? What's happening?" And they were told, well, nearby, at the sacred lake near Mount Kailash, are living 500 of Buddha Shakyamuni's disciples, 500 arhats, and soon they will arrive. So this is all in preparation for them. Lord Shiva offers these 500 disciples lunch every day. He offers them alms. So this is in preparation for them. And the two brothers were amazed to hear this. They thought, my goodness, if Lord Shiva is paying homage to Buddha Shakyamuni and his disciples, if he is making offerings to them like this, well then that kind of answers our question. If Buddha and his disciples are objects of worship for Lord Shiva, then it goes without saying that Buddha Shakyamuni is superior to Shiva himself. And then soon afterwards they were able to meet Lord Shiva. They came face to face with Lord Shiva and they asked their question very frankly. They were very candid. They said, "Lord Shiva, we have come here to see you for this and that reason. We've made the journey from India. And what we want to ask is, between the teachings of the Vedas and the teachings of Buddha Shakyamuni, which is the most authentic teaching? Which is the supreme teaching?" And in answer to this candid question, Lord Shiva gave a very candid reply. He said, the authentic teaching is the teaching of Buddha Shakyamuni. His is the authentic teaching, his is the authentic path. It's only by following the path that Buddha Shakyamuni taught that we can reach liberation and enlightenment. No other path will lead us to that same goal. And Lord Shiva said, and so I am offering lunch. I am offering a meal to 500 arhats, disciples of Buddha Shakyamuni. Soon they will be here to receive this offering. And when the two brothers heard this, they gained such clarity and certainty. they thought, right, now it is all crystal clear. When you look at the teachings of Buddha Shakyamuni, you can see you can see from the teachings, the texts themselves, that these teachings are supremely authentic. They are free of contradictions, free of inaccuracies, perfectly consistent and true from beginning to end. On top of that, Lord Shiva has just affirmed our understanding that Buddha Shakyamuni's teaching really is unique and supreme. So with this, they gained a kind of unshakable sense of certainty in the fact that Buddha Shakyamuni's teachings are the most authentic. And just a few moments later, then the sky the sky turned yellow pretty much as these 500 arhats approached the area. They were flying through the air, wearing their saffron monastic robes. It was like a huge flock of birds just filling the sky. And they swooped down, landed before them, and they took their seats and so on, just as Lord Shiva, in the area that Lord Shiva had prepared. And then these two brothers witnessed Lord Shiva make this elaborate and deeply respectful offering to the 500 arhats, placing his head on the ground before them and presenting them with really lavish and heartfelt offerings. And so these two brothers were so incredibly overjoyed. Now they had a clear answer to their question. They had absolute certainty in the answer that Buddha Shakyamuni's teachings are the supreme, the most authentic. They had understood this. They got the answer from Lord Shiva himself, and they'd then even seen Lord Shiva express his own conviction in Buddha's teachings by witnessing him make this lavish offering to these arhats. So, overjoyed and with complete clarity of mind, the two brothers then returned to their homeland in India. They then turned to Buddha's teachings, and henceforth they followed Buddha's teachings. And then they saw the need for clarifying for other people as well the difference between the non-Buddhist teachings and the Buddhist teachings, or we could say the Hindu and the Buddhist teachings, although of course this term Hinduism didn't exist at the time of these brothers, right? It's a much more, a term that has been coined much more recently. But seeing the need to distinguish clearly between the qualities of Buddhist teachings and non-Buddhist teachings, then the brothers composed this treatise praising the unique qualities of the Buddha. So actually, one of the two brothers, Totsun Drubje, he composed Kyaparpaktu, which we can translate as praising the superior qualities or the unique qualities of the Buddha. And then the other brother, Deche, he composed a treatise entitled Superior to Other Deities, which also highlighted the unique superior qualities of Buddha, comparing them to the qualities of other deities like Brahma, Shiva, and so on and so forth. So we have these two treatises that highlight and clarify for us the unique and superior qualities of the Buddha. Today, from among these two treatises, we're going to look at the first, the one composed by Totsun Drubje, Kyaparpaktu, praising the unique qualities of the Buddha. Or as our translation has it, superior verses in praise of Buddha Shakyamuni. So now before we get further into the teaching, I'll just explain the circumstances for this teaching today and tomorrow coming about, how it is that we are here looking at this text. So in the last year, or in recent years, one of your Dharma siblings, Tsuwang Isi, excuse me if I mispronounced, he actually isn't able to be here with us this weekend. He's had to go somewhere else, but he was actually the one who requested these teachings. So last time I was here in Taiwan, we held a teaching at this same venue, and requested by the same Dharma brother, and he asked me last time to teach on Amitabha's Pure Land and the practice for cultivating Amitabha's Pure Land. And anyway, at the end of that program, he said, next time you come to Taiwan, Rinpoche, then it would be great if you could give some teachings on mind training, ideally the 7 points, 7 verses of mind training using Totsun Drubje's commentary, which is an excellent commentary, also very long, 70 or 80 folios, I think. And the plan was to make a program for 5 or 6 days and teach that text, that quite long text. But then, for various reasons, he has had to go travel elsewhere at this time, and so he's not able to be here with us. And so we haven't been able to fulfill that plan. But in any case, it's at Tsuwang Isi's request or his prompting that I'm here today teaching this text on the superior qualities of the Buddha. He suggested that it could be something very beneficial for the younger students, or maybe we could say the newer students. In Taiwan, people here in Taiwan love very kind of grand and lofty teachings. They like to receive empowerments and very high teachings like on the Great Perfection, the Great Seal, Mahasandhi, Mahamudra. And they like to receive lots of empowerments, and like I said, high empowerments as well, of Yamantaka and Kalachakra and Vajrakalaya and so on and so forth. Also, Lamje, the major teaching of the Sakya school. These sorts of very major and lofty teachings. And they don't seem very keen on or interested in the fundamental teachings of the Buddha Dharma, the teachings that are common to all vehicles. But actually, for those of us who want to practice the Dharma, well, it's vital that we have a proper grounding and a proper foundation in the fundamental tenets of Buddha's teachings. If we lack that foundation, that foundational understanding, then even if we receive very high and lofty teachings, and even if they're presented to us very well, if we from our own side lack this foundation, we won't be able to understand and actually kind of get the heart, the real crux of those more major lofty teachings. So what is the most essential thing we need to understand at the very beginning? What's the first thing we need to understand? Well, it is going for refuge. How to go for refuge. If we don't understand refuge, then we cannot understand bodhicitta. And if we don't understand bodhicitta, well, then it's not possible for us to understand, say, Vajrasattva practice, mandala offering practice, Guru Yoga practice, and so on, if we speak from the perspective of the Nyingma teachings and approach. So if we lack an understanding of the foundation of refuge and then bodhicitta, the practices of the 500,000-fold accumulation, the mudra practices, we won't be able to understand those. Forget then about understanding the generation stage and completion stage practices, the practices of the subtle channels, winds and essences, or the Great Perfection, the Great Seal, and so on. So the first thing we need to understand is refuge. And to understand refuge, or the process of taking refuge, we need to understand the difference between Buddhist teachings and non-Buddhist teachings. If we're not aware of the differences between the teachings of Buddha and other religions or other traditions, then we will not understand the real essence and heart of refuge. These days it seems Buddha's teachings are very popular. Buddhism is becoming very popular. Of course, Buddhism has been spread and established in Taiwan for a long time. It is your heritage, your tradition. But in other countries that are non-Buddhist, in those countries too, like in Western countries like America and so on, even in countries in the Middle East, like Arab countries, you hear about this increasing interest in Buddhism. People really turning to Buddhism and feeling really fond of, really interested in Buddhism. So there's an increasing interest in Buddhism, but if people lack an understanding of the foundation or the fundamental tenets of Buddhism, then it really won't bring much benefit to just jump into higher teachings. Without the foundation, we cannot build a structure, right? So at the outset, establishing a firm foundation by understanding these fundamental points, like refuge, is of utmost importance. if we don't build a proper foundation and then we erect, a building with 10 or 20 stories, well, the building is not going to be stable, is it? A tiny earthquake is going to bring the building tumbling down. So, in the same way, at the outset, we need to understand refuge. This is the foundational point, understanding what it means to take refuge. And to understand that, we need to understand the qualities of Buddha. And to understand that, we need to understand the difference between Buddha and other teachers, the difference between Buddha's teachings and the teachings of others. And how to understand these points, how to understand how and why Buddha is superior to other teachings, how and why his teaching is superior. Well, by studying texts like this text that we are about to look at. Otherwise, we might hear and then repeat the fact that, Buddha's teaching is superior, Buddha himself is superior. But how is he superior? What makes him superior? We need to know the reasons, right? So when we say, Buddha is superior, well, superior to what? To who? Well, superior to other deities, other teachers. Okay, like who? Like non-Buddhist teachers, and like Mahadev, Brahma, Shiva, and so on and so forth. So those are all primarily Hindu deities, but we could extend it to the Christian God, or the Holy Trinity of Christianity, and Allah of the Islamic tradition, and so on. So Buddha is superior to those other teachers. Well, what qualities, what things make him superior? We need to have a very clear idea, a concrete understanding of these points. Of course, if someone has engaged in, formal study of the scriptures, gone to a shedra or monastic college, studied in a monastery, then they will have an understanding of all of these points. So that's all fine. But for the rest of us, like those of you here in Taiwan or in America and so on, you will not have engaged in such study, and to then just jump straight into higher teachings like Dzogchen and Mahamudra and so on and so forth without an understanding of these fundamental points, without an understanding of the most important, crucial points, well, that is not very useful. And when you look around, you can see many people here in Taiwan, overseas in America and other places, where you can see many people who are exactly in this situation. They have received teachings on Dzogchen and so on and so forth, but they have not yet understood these fundamental points. And for this reason, then I felt it would be very helpful, very beneficial to teach this text, actually, for us to study this text. And I shared that with Tsuwang Isi, your Dharma brother or friend, group member, however we put it. And that was the condition then for these teachings this weekend to be arranged. So I mentioned this text to him, and then he kind of shared the idea with many of you, with the group, and helped arrange this weekend. So that's how we come to be here today. So the text begins with the title. In Sanskrit, Vishesha Stava, excuse my bad pronunciation, in Tibetan Kyabardapapitova, and in English, superior verses in praise of Buddha Shakyamuni. So there's a lot to say about the title here and titles of texts in general. But we won't go into all of these details. I'm not going to take that sort of approach, the approach we would take when teaching, say, in a monastic college and so on. Simply speaking, we can say the title, well, first of all, we have the title in Sanskrit, in the Indian language. That is Vishesha Stava. And we can translate the first part of this, Vishesha, into English as these superior qualities, and then Stava is praise. So altogether this has been translated as superior verses in praise of Buddha Shakyamuni. So the title in short reads, praising the superior or unique qualities of Buddha, right? So Buddha Shakyamuni is just implied here, praising the superior qualities. Well, what superior qualities are we talking about? Of course, these superior qualities are going to be described in the text. That is indeed what the text discusses, and each verse will give us, will focus on a kind of specific superior aspect or quality of Buddha. But to sum it up, to present kind of the heart and essence of it, as Vimalamitra said, To explain things in detail is the approach of philosophical scriptures. To condense things into their vital point is the approach of pith instructions. So if we condense this text and its content into the vital points, well, that is the approach I'm going to take when teaching this text. I'm going to take the approach of the pith instructions, which is to focus on the main points, condensing all of the material into their main essential points, a bit like highlighting the essential point, kind of so that you can point your finger at it and say, right, that is it. This is the approach of the pith instructions. On the other hand, we have the approach of philosophical texts, or we could say authoritative texts, which is to take a much more elaborate approach. You go into the material in great depth and you present it in terms of its essence, its defining features, its categories, divisions, and so on. And whatever the subject matter is, you present it in enormous detail and variation. That is the approach of philosophical texts. And indeed, this is actually a philosophical text. It is an authoritative scripture. But, and if we were teaching this text in, say, a monastic college, we would take that approach, presenting it in terms of, the essence and characteristics and so on of each and every point presented. But we're not going to take this approach today and tomorrow. It doesn't fit the context or the audience. And so for all of you here, more appropriate, more helpful is the approach of pith instructions. So focusing on the heart and essence of the subject matter and pinpointing those essential points. So we're talking here then about the superior qualities of Buddha, right? Well, superior in what sense? Well, one of the main ways in which Buddha is superior is that he is a superior object of refuge, or a superior source of refuge. And again, in English, for refuge, we could say protection, safety. So, shall we translate that as the superior quality of refuge? Superior quality of refuge, the superior quality of the view of the natural state, the superior quality of the meditation that is trained in, the superior quality of the conduct that is upheld, and the superior quality of the result that is obtained. And we could actually just say the superiority. So the superiority of refuge, of the view of meditation, conduct, and fruition. These are the 5 superior qualities that all-knowing Longchenpa highlights. This is how he presents the superiority of Buddha and Buddha's teachings in comparison to non-Buddhist teachings. George Palden Atisha, well, when distinguishing between Buddhists and non-Buddhists, he says the dividing line is whether someone has taken refuge in the 3 jewels or not. So that's another way to present it. Then what is the difference between the Hinayana and Mahayana, the foundational and greater vehicle teachings of Buddha? Well, the difference lies in whether one has bodhicitta or not. And then what is the difference between the sutra vehicles and the tantric vehicles of Buddhist teachings? Well, whether one possesses skillful means or not. So those are distinctions or dividing lines as presented by George Palden Atisha. And then we have that 5-fold distinction between Buddhist and non-Buddhist teachings as presented by all-knowing Longchenpa. So in short, we must distinguish between the teachings of Buddha and the teachings of other traditions in these and other ways. So we can present the differences between Buddha and other teachers and other teachings in these ways. We can condense all of the differences and superior qualities into these 5 essential points, as Longchenpa does, right? So we can use this then as a framework for presenting these teachings as pith instructions, right? Since this is the approach we're going to take. So we have these 5 superior features, the superiority of the support, objects of refuge, the superiority of the view of the natural state, the superiority of the meditation to be trained in, the superiority of the conduct that is upheld, and enacted, and the superiority of the fruition that is attained, right? These 5. And all of the details and many other points that are mentioned in the text, our text here, superior verses in praise of Buddha Shakyamuni, they can all be condensed into and contained in these 5 principal differences. We will see this as we go through the text. The text does not follow the same order as Longchenpa's list of 5. So when I was preparing and reading the text in quite a lot of detail in the previous days, I saw that so the order doesn't quite match with Longchenpa's list, but that's not a problem. All the points are there, but we will see that. Say the points about the superior qualities in terms of the view. Sometimes a lot of those come kind of after an explanation of the superior qualities of a meditation and so on and so forth. But the point is that we can condense all of the many superior qualities, unique qualities of Buddha and his teaching into these 5, right? The superiority in terms of refuge, view, meditation, conduct, and fruition. So the first, the superiority of the basis for refuge or object of refuge, well, that is what will be presented in the first few verses, and we'll go through that. Then we have the superiority in terms of the view meaning understanding of reality, the natural state, and we can see this through Buddha's teachings on the Four Noble Truths. Then we have the superiority of the meditation that is trained in, namely the unique meditation that is the natural unity of shamatha and vipassana. This is a type of meditation only only explained by Buddha in his teachings. It is not something taught or understood in non-Buddhist teachings. We'll see that Buddha's teachings are also superior in terms of the result that they lead us to attain. So Buddha's teachings lead us to attain liberation, one of 3 types of liberation. These are attained by following Buddha's teachings, but these states of liberation cannot be attained by following non-Buddhist teachings. When you follow non-Buddhist paths, well, you can only reach the summit of cyclic existence, states of the gods in the form and formless realms, and so on. But you cannot actually attain liberation from samsara as a whole. That liberation can only be attained by following the Buddhist path. And then we have the superiority of conduct, namely the conduct of non-violence that Buddha taught. So the conduct of non-violence, of avoiding harming others. And when we reach the level of the Bodhisattva teachings, well, we're not then just focusing on refraining from harming others, but actually actively engaged in benefiting others. And in the secret mantra teachings, well then methods and means for benefiting sentient beings in really vast and varied ways are taught. So in short, the conduct taught by Buddha is superior to modes of conduct taught by other non-Buddhist teachers. And again, these we will see as we go through the text that all of these 5 aspects of superiority that Longchenpa sums up, they are all present and explained in our text, the superior verses in praise of Buddha Shakyamuni. Complete, but presented in a different order and kind of scattered here, there, and everywhere throughout the text. So again, they're not presented in this systematic way. First of all, here are the differences in terms of the refuge, here are the differences in terms of the view, then meditation, conduct, and fruition. They're not presented in that order so systematically, but nevertheless, all of those differences are present, are explained 100% in the text. So we'll begin, and the text begins also with the first of these 5 superiorities, superiority of refuge. And this also connects to the distinction, to the way Jogye and Atisha distinguishes Buddhists from non-Buddhists. Now, Atisha says that which distinguishes a Buddhist from a non-Buddhist is whether one has taken refuge or not. What do we mean by refuge here? We mean actively taking refuge, going for refuge in the 3 jewels, the jewel of Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, and authentically taking refuge or placing one's trust in those objects. One who takes refuge in that way is a Buddhist, and one who does not is a non-Buddhist. So that is the dividing line. So if one does not hold Buddha to be one's object of refuge, the supreme teacher to whom one goes for refuge, in whom one places one's trust. If instead one holds other gods, maybe Hindu gods, Brahma, Vishnu, so on and so forth, as objects of refuge, if one places one's trust in those deities, or if you place your trust in the deities of other traditions, Rinpoche mentioned several Chinese names, or any other deity. In short, if you place your trust and take refuge in any teacher other than Buddha, well, that means you are not a Buddhist. To place your trust and go for refuge in the Buddha, to hold Buddha to be the supreme teacher, that makes you a Buddhist, a follower of Buddha. And literally in Tibetan we say insider. So Buddhists are referred to insiders, and non-Buddhists are referred to as outsiders. And these days some scholars are explaining these words. So our Tibetan terms, which literally insider and outsider, these are the terms we use to talk about Buddhists and non-Buddhists. There are some scholars these days explaining these the etymologies of insider and outsider as meaning insider describes Buddhists because Buddhists are those who focus inwardly on the mind, the inner workings of mind, whereas outsider, the word outsider is used to describe non-Buddhists because non-Buddhists focus on external phenomena, material phenomena, and so on. That is a very compelling and very nice way actually to explain those terms, but the real kind of root and source of those words is, as I just explained them a moment ago. We say insider and outsider in the sense of, those who are kind of in our party, or those who are on the inside, those who are with us, the insiders, just like you'd talk about your family and close circle as like the insiders, right? And those who are not part of the family or the same group, well, they're outsiders. So that's kind of the original sense and meaning of those terms. We could equally translate these words into English. Instead of saying literally insiders and outsiders, we could just say Buddhists and non-Buddhists. And what is the difference between insiders and outsiders, or Buddhists and non-Buddhists? Well, the dividing line is whether one genuinely goes for refuge in the three jewels of Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, or not. And what do we mean by go for refuge? Well, we could talk about that in a lot of detail, defining the essence of refuge, its defining characteristics, the different types of refuge, and so on. There's a lot to be said, and you can find those details in other teachings and texts. So we won't go into those details here, though. In any case, we're saying the definition of a Buddhist is one who takes refuge in the three jewels of Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. And it's taught that when you take refuge in the Buddha, then you should no longer take refuge, or we could say place your trust in non-Buddhist teachers. So related to the three refuge objects of Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, we have three vows that we must, we have two sets of vows, 3 things we must do and 3 things we must avoid, and so on. And the other day, many of you took the refuge vows, and at that time I explained the refuge precepts in detail. So we won't go into such detail today. In short, once you've taken refuge in the Buddha, then you do not take refuge in other teachers. Once you've taken refuge in the Dharma, meaning Buddha's teachings, then you must no longer harm beings. So you must refrain from harming others. And once you've taken refuge in the Sangha, then you should avoid negative company. So what do we mean by bad company? Well, what we mean is that people who criticize Buddha's teachings, who slander the Dharma and the three jewels, who don't believe in karmic cause and effect and so on, we should avoid hanging out with such people. So these are the first 3 refuge precepts, and they are prohibitions, right? Things we need to avoid doing. Then we have some further precepts. Having taken refuge in the Buddha, we must pay respect to any and all representation of Buddha, whether it be a statue, an illustration, a drawing. No matter what its quality, we should pay respect to that image, since it represents our object of refuge, the Buddha. So even a small tsatsa, meaning like a small mold, we should pay respect to that, thinking this is a representation of Buddha, this is the jewel of Buddha. Secondly, having taken refuge in the Dharma, then we must pay respect and venerate all teachings of the Buddha, so all scriptures, all versions, editions, scriptures of Buddha's teachings, the words of Buddha himself, the treatises that comment on those words, and so on and so forth. We should show our respect to those scriptures, place them on the crown of our head. Even a single page of teaching, even a single page of scripture, or even a few lines, even a syllable of scripture, we should pay deep respect to that, seeing it as Buddha's own word. Thirdly, having taken refuge in the Sangha, well, then we should cultivate respect and pure perception for all of the ordained Sangha, so those who have the novice and full monastic vows, lamas, monks, monastics, monks and nuns, monastics. These are members of the Sangha, right? The ordained Sangha. So, of course, having taken refuge in the Sangha, we should show them respect. We should cultivate respect and pure perception for those practitioners. After all, the source of our merit, the field for the accumulation of merit, is the Sangha, the ordained Sangha. So we should show utmost respect for them. But we shouldn't limit it to that. Even the robes of the ordained Sangha, their shawls, skirts, and so on, we should pay respect to those robes, placing them on the crown of our head, treating them respectfully, and so on. So these are the precepts, or we could say the refuge vows. They involve 3 things we should avoid and 3 things we should do. And there are, in addition, many other subsidiary precepts that pertain to refuge, but we won't go into all of those details, we just don't have time. So what we've been talking about is the first of these 5 main superiorities, right, or distinguishing features. The first being the superiority of the object of refuge. So this is a very important and also distinguishing feature in the sense that, as Atisha said, the difference between Buddhists and non-Buddhists is whether one takes refuge genuinely or not in the 3 jewels of Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. So this is a really crucial point. But is that the only difference between Buddhists and non-Buddhists? Is the question of whether one takes refuge in the 3 jewels or not? Is that all that distinguishes Buddhists from non-Buddhists? Well, no. It's not as simple as that. Longchenpa highlighted this and pointed this out. It's not just whether one... So the dividing line between Buddhists and non-Buddhists does not just lie in whether one takes refuge in the 3 jewels or not, but it also lies in one's view, one's meditation, one's conduct, and fruition. So 5 main differences, 5 dividing lines between Buddhists and non-Buddhists. So then you might think, well, if that's the case, if there's differences in these 5 different ways, why did Jyotipad and Atisha say that the difference between Buddhists and non-Buddhists, or outsiders and insiders, is whether one takes refuge in the 3 jewels or not? Well, what he said is indeed true. It is correct. That is a major difference, a major dividing line between Buddhists and non-Buddhists. But as we say in English, if we look into the matter in more detail, then in addition to that single dividing line, whether one takes refuge in the 3 jewels or not, we can identify more dividing lines. So dividing line in terms of the view, in terms of meditation, in terms of conduct and fruition. So that is Longchenpa's more detailed presentation. And so in this vein, Longchenpa also explained that there's a difference between Buddhists and non-Buddhists in the view of the natural state. Or we could say simply one's view of reality. So In this regard, when it comes to the difference, when we're distinguishing Buddhists and non-Buddhists in terms of their view of reality or the natural state, well, we can say that generally those who accept the 4 seals that are hallmarks of the Buddha's teaching, and more specifically those who accept the ineffable, inconceivable state, they are Buddhists. Those who hold such a view are Buddhists. Those who do not accept that view are the non-Buddhists, and they, by not accepting that view, they fall into extreme views of either nihilism or eternalism. So the 4 seals, what we call the 4 seals, or what is also termed as the four seals that are hallmarks of the Buddhist view. These 2 terms are synonymous, whether we say the 4 seals or the 4 seals that are hallmarks of the Buddhist view. We're talking about the same thing, and these are the fundamental tenets of the Buddhist view. So those who accept these fundamental tenets, the 4 seals, are Buddhists, and those who do not accept them are non-Buddhists. Actually, so a more literal translation, a more correct translation of the first of these 2 terms would be the 4 aphorisms. And then the translation of the second term is the 4 seals that are hallmarks of the Buddhist view. So actually, from among these terms, the second is kind of the second resonates more strongly. It's more, let's say it's the stronger term of the 2, in the sense that when we hear this word hallmark, well, it's very clear then. Okay, so this is a hallmark, this is a sign, like this is the symbol that, okay, this view is the view of Buddhism. A bit like in an army, soldiers, depending on which army they belong to, they'll have a certain badge or sign or flag or something stitched onto their uniform, right? So it's immediately clear. When you look at the soldier wearing their uniform, it's immediately clear what army they belong to, right? That is, so you could say that sign on their uniform is a hallmark of that army, right? So in the same way, these 4 seals are the hallmark of the Buddhist view. Anyone who accepts these 4 seals, that is a clear sign that they are Buddhist, and anyone who does not accept them, well, they are non-Buddhist. So when we speak of non-Buddhist, well, in the Buddhist scriptures, we find this term outsider, right? So that's typically the word used to describe non-Buddhists. They're described as outsiders, and Buddhists described as insiders. Right? These days we often say, we use the term Hindu, right? And actually the term Hindu is, so these days in Dharma teachings, people often replace the word outsider or non-Buddhist with the term Hindu. But this is actually not correct. It doesn't quite cover it. Hindu, it seems, is a word that derives from the term Indu, which actually means water or refers to the name of a particular river. So came to be used to describe someone who lived on the banks of a river, namely those certain practitioners who lived on the banks of a river. That seems to be the root of the word Hindu. But it doesn't actually cover the intended meaning of the Buddhist term outsider. Outsider refers to all those who are not insiders, right? Namely all non-Buddhists. We have another term, which in Sanskrit is tirthaka. We could translate it into English as extremist. That's an even better term, actually, to use to describe the non-Buddhists. So actually, this is the most appropriate term to use, extremist. So this describes very accurately all non-Buddhists. They are people who are holding an extreme position, either the extreme of eternalism or the extreme of nihilism. So again, the term Hinduism is actually not a very accurate term, and it cannot stand in for these other terms that we use, outsider or extremist. And indeed, Hinduism seems to be a term that's been coined quite recently, in the way I explained. We can think also of the term Lamaism, right, which was a term coined maybe at some point in the last century to describe Tibetan Buddhism. or Buddhism as practiced in Tibet. Seems that people observed that in Tibet, practitioners really place a lot of importance and really highly revere their teachers like Rinpoche and Rongzom Mahapandita and Milarepa and so on and so forth. All of the teachers, the gurus, the lamas are held to be so important and revered so highly. So therefore the foreigners just gave this name to the Tibetan tradition, Lamaism. But it's not actually an accurate term. It's something that was coined recently by a certain group of people, and it doesn't really cover it. So we could say the same about Hinduism. So Hinduism is not an accurate term, actually. It's not a sufficient term for us to use in this context. The correct terms would be extremist or outsider. And outsider actually is the term that has been used to describe non-Buddhists for thousands of years. So that is the traditional and correct term. So outsiders or extremists, namely the non-Buddhists, they do not accept the 4 seals that are hallmarks of Buddha's view or Buddhist teaching. So what are these 4 seals? What are these 4 hallmarks? Well, the first is that everything conditioned is impermanent. What do we mean by condition? Well, we could equally say compounded. We mean conditioned or compounded phenomena, namely phenomena that come about due to causes and conditions, things that are conditioned or compounded or produced by causes and conditions. So actually everything that we can think of, everything we know of is a conditioned phenomena. This building that we're in, it is a conditioned phenomena, right? It's been produced by the coming together of various causes and conditions, the materials, the human labor, and so on and so forth. That's how it's come into being. Likewise, our own body, right, has come into being mainly through the causes and conditions of our parents, and so on and so forth. Everything in the world is a conditioned phenomena. It is the product of causes and conditions. And everything that is conditioned is impermanent. Everything that is conditioned is momentary, changing second by second. Therefore, all conditioned things are impermanent. This is the first of the 4 seals. This is a point that is accepted by all Buddhist followers, whether from the Vaibhashika school of the Shravakas all the way up to the pinnacle of vehicles, Hatha Yoga, the great perfection. The second seal is all emotions are defiled. The second seal rather is everything defiled is suffering. And what do we mean by defiled? Well, we mean the emotions of attachment, aversion, ignorance, and so on. The 6 avenues of defilement, as explained in treatises like the Treasury of Abhidhamma. In short, defilement here refers to the emotions. So it is said all emotions or all defilements are suffering. And the word defilement, or the word that we translate into English as defilement, has the sense of falling. It also has an active sense of that which falls, like that which falls into the mud and sinks into the ground. So the cause for us falling into samsara, for us sinking into samsara, are these defilements and afflictions. And all defilements, all emotions are suffering. As long as we have an emotion, just a single emotion present in our mind, we are suffering. It doesn't matter how rich we are, how poor we are, how high or low. The presence of a single emotion causes us suffering. Even if you're a monk or a nun, a lama or what have you, and you're dressed very nicely in your robes and all of that, but if you have a single emotion present in your mind, pride, jealousy, what have you, well, it follows then that you are suffering. So again, it doesn't matter who we are, Kempo, Truku, Geshe, nun, the presence of a single emotion means the presence of suffering. The third seal is all phenomena are empty and without self. All phenomena here means every single phenomena from form all the way up to the state of omniscience. There is not a single thing that is not empty. They are all empty and they are without self, meaning they are without reality or inherent nature. The 4th seal is nirvana is peace. Nirvana, if we translate the term literally into English, it means the transcendence of sorrow. So to be free of suffering, to be free of anguish, that is a state of peace. The state of peace refers to the state of liberation, the three levels of liberation, or we could say the 3 states of enlightenment. So this includes then the states of Arhat attained by the Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas. Those are states of peace. They are states of nirvana, yes, but they are not complete peace or complete awakening. The Shravaka and Pratyeka Buddha Arhats still experience some subtle suffering because they have not completely abandoned the cognitive obscurations. So they are not entirely beyond suffering, but nevertheless they have attained a certain level of peace. So they still have a degree. When we say they still have a degree of suffering, we're not talking about the coarse suffering that we experience, but suffering in the sense that they still have some degree of ignorance, some areas of lack of awareness. So hence they still have some suffering in that sense. The state of Buddhahood, of perfect Buddhahood, is completely free of all suffering. So therefore it is described as a state of peace. So these are the 4 seals that are hallmarks of the Buddha's teaching. All conditioned things are impermanent. Everything defiled is suffering. All phenomena are empty and without self. Nirvana is peace. And these are, say, fundamental tenets of Buddha's teachings, and they are common tenets in the sense that they are accepted by all followers of Buddha, from the Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas on up. Then we also have some uncommon or more specific points of the view. The view of simplicity, the ineffable, inconceivable state beyond all conceptual extremes. So this is an aspect of the view or level of the view that is unique in the sense that it is not accepted by all Buddhist followers, but it is accepted by all of the followers of the greater vehicle. So everyone from the mind-only proponents on up. So the state of emptiness, that is simplicity beyond all elaborations, this is accepted by the mind-only proponents on up. So say above or after the mind-only proponents, we have the Madhyamaka proponents, and then we can go all the way up to the pinnacle of vehicles, the Ati Yoga. So everyone following the greater vehicle, from the mind-only proponents all the way up to the great perfection Ati Yoga practitioners, they accept emptiness beyond elaboration. So this is the, we could say, unique or uncommon view of Buddha Dharma. And those who accept this view, they are called Buddhists, they are called insiders. Those who do not accept this view, who on the other hand believe in an almighty creator, an omnipotent agent, who is the producer of all things, those who believe such a creator is permanent, that phenomena are permanent. So this view of permanence is held by many non-Buddhist outsiders, extremists, who hold that Atman is permanent, and so on. This view is held by, for instance, the Samkhya school, those who follow the Vedas, and so on. This view is in discord with the 4 seals. Therefore, those who hold such views are outsiders. So this is the distinction between outsiders and insiders, non-Buddhists and Buddhists in terms of the view. So this is how we distinguish between Buddhists and non-Buddhists in terms of the view, right? So whether one accepts the 4 seals or not. The first of the 4 seals is that everything conditioned is impermanent. Well, what is the view of most non-Buddhists, of most extremists? Well, they believe in an almighty creator who is the agent and producer of all phenomena, this world, and so on. And they believe that this almighty is permanent. They believe the producer himself is permanent, and that his products too are permanent. These extremists believe that the almighty creator agent is permanent, but actually if the cause is permanent, then the results it produces must also be permanent, right? The cause and result must be of a similar nature. So if they, as they do, posit a permanent creator, it follows that the creations too must be permanent. And this is addressed in treatises like Dzema Namjal, the commentary on valid cognition, and refuted with many lines of logic. The outsiders or extremists also speak about a permanent self or a real self, which is not accepted by Buddhists, right? Buddha taught all phenomena are without self. Furthermore, Buddha taught everything defiled, all emotions are suffering. But many extremists, outsiders, they tell stories of their deities like Ram, Wangchuk, and so on, waging kind of holy wars and fighting in battle and being overcome by anger and hatred and shooting arrows at people and so on. And they describe all of this anger as actually a kind of divine or glorious quality, as part of their divine qualities, like the fact that Ram has the ability to kill this many sentient beings and that he has mastery over this and that weapon. They regard all these things as divine qualities. So they're not describing them, not regarding them as suffering. So Buddha taught that all afflictions, all emotions are suffering, that this is what Buddhist followers believe. But nevertheless, these extremists, they hold quite a different belief. They regard these emotions actually as wonderful qualities, divine qualities, a reflection of the deity's virtues. The fact that Ram and so on have such intense aggression and such power, that Lord Shiva and other deities have so much passion and desire that they have, dozens or even hundreds of wives, that they are always lying with Umadevi, and Lord Shiva is always lying with Umadevi and his other consorts. This is regarded as actually a positive quality by the outsiders. So this is not the Buddhist outlook, right? The Buddhist outlook is that all of these emotions are defilements, and defilements are suffering. Their very nature is suffering. But we see quite a different view held by the outsiders. For instance, in the Mahabharata, the great epic, non-Buddhist epic, then there are tales of people dying on the battlefield in this holy war, and it's said that by virtue of dying while waging war, while waging holy war, they will be reborn in a pure realm, in a heaven. So we would, as Buddhists, we would regard fighting, conflict, harming others as a sin, as negative karma, but these outsiders regard the very same actions as positive karma that will lead to rebirth in heaven and so on. So this is in direct contradiction with the Buddhist outlook or the Buddhist view. Then we have the third of the four seals, that all phenomena are empty and without self. And again, the outsiders or extremists hold a view that is in direct contradiction with this. They regard phenomena to be impermanent, truly established. Typically, they'll explain things like their almighty creator or Atman, the soul, as being permanent, singular, and independent, self-sufficient. But this is not the Buddhist understanding. The Buddhist understanding is that all phenomena lack self, all phenomena are emptiness, the self itself is empty, and all phenomena, whatever phenomena we consider, the aggregates, elements, sense fields, and so on and so forth, none of them have any reality or any true establishment. And we talk about two types of no self. So when we say all phenomena lack self, we're talking about two types of self, the self of person and the self of phenomena. So there is no self of person nor any self of phenomena. This twofold division is presented in Chandrakirti's Introduction to the Middle Way and other such treatises. So the Buddha's teachings teach that phenomena lack self, whereas in direct contradiction, non-Buddhist teachings state that phenomena possess self. So this is another difference between, another dividing line between the Buddhist and non-Buddhist, whether one accepts there to be a self or no self. And here when we're speaking about the non-Buddhist, the outsiders, we're referring mainly to the Hindu views. So just use that word for lack of any other option. We're talking about the various Hindu views, right? But we should understand that when we say extremists and non-Buddhists, the Christians and Muslims and so on are also included in this category. And they too hold an extreme view, right? They believe in a truly existent creator God. They believe that God is permanent, it's real, and so on, right? That this world and everything in it was intentionally created by an omnipotent God. So they too hold extremist views, right? That are in direct contradiction with Buddhist view and Buddhist tenets. the fourth seal is that nirvana is peace. So how do we as Buddhists understand nirvana? We understand it to be a state in which all concepts, all the movements of conceptual mind have come to a halt, all movements of conceptual mind have been removed or come to a complete halt once and for all, and one has directly and correctly realized the true nature of all things, emptiness, the natural state. That, we say, is nirvana. In contrast, non-Buddhists describe nirvana, their notion of nirvana, as some material or established thing. Like there are some non-Buddhist schools who describe nirvana as an enormous parasol, white parasol, open in the sky, and when you attain nirvana you ascend to that place. It's like a location, a physical place and state that you enter. There are some who say, nirvana is like the sun, or nirvana is the sun. When you attain nirvana you dissolve, in order to attain nirvana you must dissolve and merge with the sun. And there are some who say, nirvana is Brahma. So to attain nirvana you must dissolve inseparably with Brahma, and Brahma himself is truly existent somehow. So this is in stark contrast to the Buddhist understanding of nirvana. The Buddhist teachings explain nirvana to be a state free of conceptual mind. So when complete freedom from concept and conceptual mind is attained, that is nirvana, that is peace. Like in Chandrakirti's text, the Introduction to the Middle Way, he describes nirvana, and I'll just paraphrase the verse Rinpoche quoted. He describes it as being a state of cessation in which the firewood of conceptual mind is completely burned up beyond trace. Conceptual mind, thinking mind, comes to a halt, and as a result, then the kaya, the sacred dimension of enlightenment, manifests. So that is the Dhammakaya, right? Freedom from thought. So we see another stark contrast here between the understanding of nirvana. Buddha teaches nirvana to be a state, an immaterial state. That's probably not actually a good way, probably not sufficient way to describe it. He describes it as a state of emptiness, lacking reality, lacking establishment. It is not something material or substantial, right? But in contrast, the non-Buddhists describe nirvana as something real, truly established, and as a material or substantial state. So the non-Buddhists of all schools are not in line with the view of Buddhism, the view of the four seals that are hallmark of Buddha's teaching. They do not accept these four seals. They do not share this outlook, this understanding. So therefore they are called outsiders. Outsiders because they do not hold the same view as Buddhist followers who, as I said before, we describe as insiders. So this is how we distinguish between Buddhists and non-Buddhists, insiders and outsiders in terms of the view. This is a really incredibly important point. I cannot emphasize the importance of this enough. So please, all of you, take this to heart and really take these points to heart, remember them, reflect upon them. So just a few more words and thoughts about the dividing line between Buddhists and non-Buddhists in terms of the view. Well, non-Buddhist extremists, they believe that all phenomena are permanent, real, established. This is not the understanding of Buddhists. Buddha taught that phenomena are not permanent or established in any way. Things lack reality from their own side. All phenomena are the manifestations of interdependence. They are all the result of the coming together of causes and conditions. So all phenomena are conditioned and they lack reality. Our body is a manifestation of interdependence. It is the production of causes and conditions. Our experiences of pleasure and pain and so on, they are also the manifestations of interdependence. They are the results of the causes and conditions, namely the positive and negative karma that we have accumulated. Every aspect of our experience, so whether someone is rich or poor, whether they are handsome or not, what their status is, what kind of experience they have in life, all of these things are manifestations of interdependence. They are all the result of causes and conditions. They are not the creations of some almighty God. They are not something produced by an omnipotent agent. They're not something sent down from heaven, ready-made, so to speak. So therefore it is understood, Buddha taught, and it's understood in the Buddhist teachings, that all phenomena are interdependent. They are all the manifestations of interdependence. All things are created by causes and conditions, and this is a unique quality, a unique feature of the Buddhist view. So that was all about the view, and the view is of utmost importance. Once the view is clearly established, once the view is clearly understood, then the meditation, conduct, and fruition, well, they come quite naturally, because the meditation, conduct, and fruition, they all stem from the view. They're all rooted in the view. In the Noble Sutra, Recollecting the Three Jewels, it is said Buddha is described as being endowed with awareness and with feet, with legs. So what does that mean? Well, when it says Buddha is endowed with awareness, it refers to the eyes of wisdom, and legs refers to meditation. So it's saying that the view is like eyes, our eyesight, and the meditation are like our legs. So if you have good eyesight, if you have eyes and you can see with those eyes, well, then you can see where you need to go, and you can then get there, right? Once you have your destination in sight, you can then use your legs to walk there and get you there. If though you cannot see, you're blind, well, even if you have legs, your legs are not going to be of much use. You might walk around, but since you can't see, you'll end up walking in the wrong direction. You won't get where you need to go. You might even walk off a cliff, walk into a wall, or if you're here somewhere like Taipei, then you are likely to walk into the road and be hit by a car or something. But equally, if you have good eyesight but your legs don't work, well, you can see where you need to go, you can see various destinations, but since you can't walk, well, you're not going to get there. So we need both, right? We need the eyes of the view and the legs of meditation. If we can see clearly with the eyes of the view and then use our legs of meditation to get us there, so to speak, well, then we will reach the destination that we want to reach. So both are of utmost importance, right? If you cannot see or if you cannot walk, well, both are going to prevent you from getting where you need to go. So the view and meditation, our eyes and legs, are of equal importance. They're equally important. They're both of utmost importance. But that said, the legs of meditation need to follow after the eyes of the view, right? So the legs of meditation need to be led by the eyes of the view. So if at the outset we can establish the view correctly, if we can see things clearly, then when we start to use our legs to walk, we will be walking in the right direction. That's to say that if we can establish the view, understand the view well to begin with, as sort of the first point, when we then turn to meditation and train in meditation, our meditation will go well, it will progress because we have that foundation of the view. So now let's move on to the dividing line in terms of meditation. So we've talked now about the dividing line between Buddhists and non-Buddhists in terms of the object of refuge, in terms of the view, and now we will look at the dividing line in terms of meditation. So first of all, Buddhist meditation is always focused on attaining liberation. So when we train in meditation as Buddhists, our intention is always to attain liberation through our meditation, because non-Buddhists and even worldly people, they also practice meditation. They practice and teach various types of meditation, and through that they can attain different types of clairvoyance, magical powers, and so on. They can attain rebirth in the form and formless realms, and other states of meditative absorption. But such states are not the aims of us Buddhists, right? As Buddhists, we train in a meditation that is the unity of shamatha and vipassana. We could say the unity of calm abiding and deep insight. But non-Buddhists, the meditations they train in are simply forms of shamatha alone. And the practice of shamatha meditation alone can bring us no more than attainments of ordinary clairvoyance and miraculous powers in this life. And in our future lives, well, it can bring us rebirth in the states of the four concentrations or the four formless realms. But training in shamatha meditation alone can never bring us to liberation or enlightenment, the state of perfect Buddhahood. That's just not possible. So non-Buddhists, yes, they practice meditation. They have various forms of meditation, but these are all merely types of shamatha meditation. They do not have or practice vipassana meditation, we could say deep insight meditation. So these days, I've mentioned this many times before. People tend to think that all forms of meditation are the same. And indeed, when you look at it from the outside, it might seem that everyone is doing the same thing. Sure, everyone sits down, takes a similar sort of meditation posture, and is sitting still and silent. But that is not all that meditation is about, right? When you look at actually what these various meditators are doing mentally, internally, how they are meditating, how they are meditating, then we actually find enormous differences, very fundamental differences in the different approaches, different types of meditation. So yes, non-Buddhists train in meditation, and it might look from the outside that they're doing the same thing as Buddhist meditators, but in fact there is an enormous difference between not just the meditations of Buddhists and non-Buddhists, but generally enormous differences between the many, many different types of meditation that we find across the board. So one can meditate on emptiness, on compassion, on shamatha, on ordinary shamatha, on superior shamatha, on the great seal, on the great perfection, on the great middle way, and so on and so forth. There are so many different types of meditation. And the difference between these various types of meditation lies in deep insight or vipassana, the degree or type of vipassana. That is where the difference lies. The difference does not lie in the aspect of shamatha. So how is it that followers of Buddha meditate? Well, they do so aiming at liberation and enlightenment. So focusing on the attainment of liberation and enlightenment, they engage in meditation, and they do so by taking refuge in the three jewels of Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. And then they meditate on the meaning of no self. So this is how Buddhists meditate. Their intention when meditating is the attainment of liberation and enlightenment. Their meditation is infused with, or we could say, takes place within the framework of having taken refuge in Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. And what is it that they're meditating on? What is it that they're familiarizing themselves with the meaning of no self? And the meaning of no self is meditated on by means of what we call the 37 factors of awakening. So by meditating on the 37 factors of awakening, then the practitioner familiarizes themselves with the meaning of no self, or the state of no self. What are these 37 factors of awakening? They are the 4 applications of mindfulness, the 4 genuine restraints, the 4 bases of miraculous powers, the 5 powers, the 5 strengths, 7 elements for enlightenment, and the Noble Eightfold Path. So altogether these make up the 37 factors of awakening. So this is what the Buddhist meditator meditates upon. So a Buddhist practitioner meditates on the 37 factors of awakening to familiarize themselves with no self. A non-Buddhist, on the other hand, does not meditate on these 37 factors. They do not meditate on no self. They train merely in shamatha, as we see these days with lots of popular forms of meditation where people sit down and they bring a singing bowl, they make a certain sound on the singing bowl, and then they focus on that sound and rest in stillness. This is a form of shamatha, right? A common form of shamatha. You do see a lot of people meditating like this these days, right? And I do wonder, how could this really be the unity of shamatha and vipassana? If one is supposedly a Buddhist, right? But this is the kind of common forms of common shamatha. This is an example of the forms of common shamatha that non-Buddhists train in. And again, these days it does seem that there is this popular but mistaken idea that that meditation is just one thing. Meditation is just kind of one common thing. There's just one form of meditation. So when we say meditation, we're always talking about the same thing, and that same thing is just to sit still in the meditation posture and still the mind, to practice some form of shamatha. And I think Rinpoche is implying that a lot of Buddhists also these days seem to have this mistaken idea, but we need to understand that that is merely a form of shamatha, and we cannot distinguish between Buddhist and non-Buddhist forms of meditation through shamatha alone, because shamatha is a meditation practice that is shared by all traditions, Buddhist and non-Buddhist both. So as a Buddhist practitioner, when one trains in meditation, one is meditating on the meaning of no self and meditating on the 37 factors of awakening. So meditating on no self and the 37 factors of awakening are the forms of meditation common to all Buddhist schools or Buddhist approaches, but then we also have forms of meditation unique to specific approaches of or vehicles of Buddhism. We have the unique approach or the unshared approach of training in the natural unity of emptiness and compassion, or emptiness and appearance, namely training in the state of simplicity, profound emptiness beyond all elaborations. So that is the meditation of the greater vehicle, the Mahayana. And if we proceed from the Mahayana to even the higher levels of Buddhist teaching, then we have the meditations of the Great Seal, Mahamudra, the Great Perfection, Dzogchen, and so on. So many different types of meditation, and all of these different types of Buddhist meditation, as I said, are meditations that involve the unity of shamatha and vipassana. And these types of meditation are not found in non-Buddhist traditions. They're not found or practiced by non-Buddhists. And so this is the dividing line, or the difference between the meditation of Buddhists and non-Buddhists. So a few more words actually about the difference between Buddhist and non-Buddhist meditation, this dividing line. The meditation practices of non-Buddhists are forms of halting thought. They suppress thought, or they bring thoughts to a halt, a temporary halt. So it's a bit like damming water. You know, you can still water and you can hold water still, stop it flowing, and hold it in a dam or in a reservoir, right? And yes, temporarily that will keep the water still. It's going to stop it flowing, stop it moving. But one day, if that dam bursts, if the reservoir breaks, well, all of that water is going to pour out, and it could even sweep away an entire village, an entire valley, right? So these days we see a lot of people suffering in this way, right? When there is heavy rainfall or floods for some reason, and then a dam bursts or a reservoir overflows, and whole villages are swept away and many people drown. So similarly, from the perspective of Mahamudra and Mahasandhi, or we could say the Great Seal and the Great Perfection, it is not beneficial. It is not a good approach to just halt or suppress thoughts. One should not try and suppress thoughts. One should, on the contrary, one should just train in letting be, in resting in natural ease. One needs to not suppress thoughts, but liberate them. One needs to not halt thoughts, but free them. And one does that by letting be, by resting in natural ease. And if instead of liberating thoughts, you just suppress them, well, sooner or later the thoughts will just build up, and you can get to the point where thoughts just explode like a bomb and cause a lot of destruction. So halting thoughts, forcefully halting thoughts or oppressing thoughts is not the way to go. And yet this is the approach of non-Buddhist meditators. Their meditations involve forcefully bringing thoughts to a halt, forcefully suppressing them. They take very stiff or physical postures. They hold their breath, they contort their breath and their body in certain ways to bring thoughts to a halt. They use intense concentration and so on to suppress their thoughts. That is the way they meditate. And such an approach can bring about shamatha, a degree of calm abiding, but no more than that. When thoughts are brought to a temporary halt, or when they temporarily subside, well then various meditative experiences will arise, namely the experiences of bliss, clarity, and non-thought. The experience of bliss refers to a feeling of this kind of all-permeating sense of bliss and contentment. The experience of clarity refers to such an intense sense of mental clarity that it's like you have clairvoyance. And the experience of non-thought is like when, well, temporarily your mind becomes so thought-free that you might even think that you've attained Buddhahood. You might think, wow, I really am totally free of emotions now. I don't have a single emotion, not a drop of desire, anger, or ignorance. So these experiences can and do arise. These are the 3 meditative experiences of bliss, clarity, and non-thought. And if you arrive at these experiences and you become attached to them, you fixate upon them, and these experiences can bring about certain degrees of clairvoyance and kind of powers, like miraculous powers as well, and intense bliss or ease, physically and mentally both. But there's nothing that special going on here. These common forms of clairvoyance and so on do not lead to liberation or enlightenment. They are temporary states and limited types of clairvoyance. They might bring some short-term benefit, like increasing your lifespan, increasing your health, but their benefits are very limited. They will not lead us to liberation or the accomplishment of enlightenment. As followers of Buddha, we do not place any importance in the attainment of such common types of clairvoyance. They are not regarded as important or significant in any way. But this is another point that it seems to me a lot of people are mistaken or unclear about these days. Generally, as Buddhists, maybe I shouldn't say too many things like this. Maybe I'll get people debating with me or making objections later on. But it does seem to me these days that even, very high lamas, very respected lamas, when they speak about meditation, they are just teaching kind of common forms of shamatha that don't, and then not clearly distinguishing between Buddhist meditation and non-Buddhist meditation. Or maybe they are, probably they are, and I just haven't heard them do so. Or maybe actually there is some kind of misunderstanding taking place. In any case, the mere suppression of thoughts is not genuine meditation. The mere suppression of thoughts will not lead us to liberation. It will not lead us to perfect Buddhahood. And these days people seem so impressed by anyone who has some kind of clairvoyance or magical power or ability. You hear people saying, wow, these non-Buddhists, they look at their clairvoyance, this and that person with clairvoyance and prescience and this and that power. There's really nothing impressive or amazing about that. It's simply a quality of mind, a quality of conceptual mind. Yes, it can be developed, but there's nothing amazing about it, because it will not lead us out of samsara to liberation or to the attainment of enlightenment. So the mere halting of thoughts or suppression of thoughts is the meditation of non-Buddhists. This is the approach of non-Buddhists. This is the samadhi of non-Buddhists. On the other hand, the meditation of Buddhists is the meditation that is the unity of shamatha and vipassana, is meditation on the 37 factors of awakening. It is meditation on no self. And when through this kind of meditation, the meditation that is the unity of shamatha and vipassana and so on, one attains clairvoyance, powers and so on, that clairvoyance, those powers, are in fact the display of primordial wisdom, a quality and outcome of realizing no self. And that approach will indeed lead to liberation and perfect enlightenment. So following the Buddhist approach of meditation, then one will, in the short term, experience the benefits of shamatha, like various types of clairvoyance and so on. But ultimately, in the long term, one will also progress towards liberation and perfect enlightenment. One will be able to completely sever and uproot the mistaken perception of self-clinging. Both types of self-clinging, the clinging or perception of self of persons and the self of phenomena, will be completely uprooted, completely undone. So the perception of a self of persons, which is the afflictive obscuration that prevents us attaining liberation from samsara, and the perception of a self of phenomena, which is the cognitive obscuration that prevents us attaining the state of omniscient enlightenment. Both of these obscurations will be completely removed, completely eliminated. They will be eliminated by the meditation that is the unity of shamatha and vipassana. They will not be undone, and liberation and enlightenment will not be attained by mere shamatha, by by meditations that merely suppress thought, or meditations that merely focus and concentrate conceptual mind. Such is the difference between the meditation of Buddhists and the meditation of non-Buddhists. Now, let's look at the dividing line between Buddhists and non-Buddhists in terms of conduct. So what is the difference in conduct? Well, the difference between the conduct of Buddhists and non-Buddhists is that non-Buddhists conduct themselves, the conduct of non-Buddhists involves engaging with objects of attachment, anger, and ignorance, and furthering those emotions. And the conduct of non-Buddhists also involves celebrating violence. The conduct of non-Buddhists regards the use of violence and harming others as an aspect of the spiritual path. So, what do we mean by this? Well, to conduct oneself. So about the emotions of desire, hatred, and ignorance. Conducting oneself in a way that indulges in these emotions, that indulges in, say, the attachment to friends, hatred to enemies, indifference to those who are neither friends or enemies. And any actions of violence, any actions of body and speech that harm others, speaking in a harsh way, in a divisive way, and so on, all of these they might be aspects of non-Buddhist conduct, but from the Buddhist point of view, these are all obstacles, hindrances, and things to avoid. So in contrast, the conduct of Buddhists is to conduct oneself free of attachment to objects. So again, we mean objects, the objects of our friends and enemies, the various sense objects of form, sound, smell, taste, texture, and so on. So to conduct oneself free of attachment and to avoid harming others. This is Buddhist conduct. So, more concisely, we can say those who conduct that regards harming others as an obstacle, as something negative, that is Buddhist conduct, and conduct that does not is non-Buddhist conduct. So more simply, we could say the conduct of non-violence is the conduct of Buddhists, and conduct that does not intentionally avoid non-violence is non-Buddhist conduct. Sorry, that wasn't so articulate, but so that was just briefly about conduct, and now I'll briefly explain the fruition, the difference between Buddhist and non-Buddhist fruition or results. So just quickly, because we are almost out of time for this session. So the Buddhist fruition is one of the three levels of enlightenment attained through the two paths. So what do we mean by the two paths here? Well, the path of the Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas on the one hand, and then the path of the Bodhisattvas. So these paths lead to the attainment of one of the three types of awakening, the awakening of the Shravakas, the Pratyeka Buddhas, and Bodhisattvas, these three. So that is the results attained by Buddhist practitioners, right? Through one of the two paths, we could say the foundational or Bodhisattva path taught by Buddha, one attains as a result the state of awakening as of a Shravaka, a Pratyeka Buddha, or a Bodhisattva. These are all three states of awakening are states of liberation. They are liberation from samsara. On the other hand, non-Buddhists do not attain liberation from samsara. The paths of non-Buddhists cannot lead one beyond samsara. So the root of samsara is the perception of a self, right? Of self-clinging, as taught by Chandrakirti in Introduction to the Middle Way. First beings conceive of self, and then they conceive of mine. So first me, and then mine, and then on this watermill of me and mine, they cycle through samsara. So in short, the root of samsara is the perception of a self, and the view of no self is the view of Buddhism. To realize in full both types of no self, the no self of persons and phenomena, is to attain the state of perfect enlightenment. So this is the state, this is the result that can be attained through the Buddhist path. But as I said, one can also attain the lesser state of awakening, the Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas. But all three states of awakening are nevertheless states of liberation. They are, at this point, one has attained complete freedom from samsara. And in contrast, none of the non-Buddhist approaches can lead one to liberation from samsara. The non-Buddhist cannot attain liberation. Such is the difference between the results attained by Buddhists and non-Buddhists, or we could say this is the dividing line between Buddhists and non-Buddhists in terms of the results they attain through their respective paths. So we will now take a break for 30 minutes or so, and then we'll resume the teaching. So let's dedicate the merit.